and welcome to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. On this week's episode of the Jazz Update, it's about June Christy. Many people have called her one of the greatest vocalists in cool jazz. So she grew up in Springfield, Illinois. She would tour and perform in local orchestras as a teenager. Then in 1945, she joined Stan Kenton's orchestra. During her stint with Kenton, she produced some timeless hits like Shoe Fly Pie, Apple Pan Dowdy. Also, their biggest selling hit, the million-selling Tampico. In 1947, she started out solo, working alongside Kenton's arranger Pete Rugolo. Her debut album went on to become a massive success. It was called Something Cool and it was released in 1954. The album also helped kickstart the vocal cool movement of the 50s. So that was a quick insight into the life and times and best hits of June Christy. More details coming up. Also coming up, some trending album and festival news. Stay tuned to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva to find out more. We'll be right back after some music. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. On this week's episode, June Christy, her life and times and best hits. And during this hour, we're going to be talking about her biography. So, June Christy started out performing with the Stan Kenton Orchestra. She also performed solo for a while. One of her best albums was her debut album, Something Cool. She was often known as one of the finest singers from the cool jazz genre. June Christy was born and raised in Springfield, Illinois. She started touring with the local school orchestras when she was 13. She continued to tour and perform with local bands throughout her teens. In 1954, she was chosen as vocalist for Stan Kenton's orchestra after Anita O'Day, another iconic jazz singer, had left the band. Some of her best hits with Stan Kenton's orchestra include songs like Shoe Fly Pie, Apple Pan Dowdy, Tampico, and How High the Moon. Tampico was Kenton's biggest selling record of all time. In 1954, the Kenton Orchestra disbanded for a while and she would sing in nightclubs, and then again they reunited in 1950. She had an iconic series of concerts in 1959 alongside Stan Kenton's orchestra and another group called the Four Freshmen. The tour was called The Road Show. In 1947, June Christy started out on a solo career. She released several long plays alongside Pete Rugolo, who'd worked alongside the Kenton Orchestra as arranger. In 1954, she released her debut album, Something Cool, alongside the Los Angeles jazz group. The album went on to become a massive success, peaked at the top of the charts upon release. It was also instrumental in launching the vocal cool movement as it was known in the 1950s. In the mid-50s and 60s, Christy also started appearing on TV programs like The Tonight Show, The Nat King Cole Show, Stars of Jazz, The Steve Allen Show, and more. She also began touring the world, performing in Europe, South Africa, Australia, and Japan. In 1969, she drew back for a while from her music scene due to health issues. In 1972, she made another appearance performing alongside the Stan Kenton Orchestra at the Newport Jazz Festival in New York City. She started touring the world again in the 70s and 80s alongside a band of West Coast jazz musicians. In 1977, she recorded her final album, Impromptu. She died in 1990, leaving behind a legacy as one of the greatest vocalists in the cool jazz genre. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. On this week's episode, June Christy, her life and times and best hits. And now it's time for some trending concert news. There's a new concert around the corner called From Tokyo to Times Square. This one's all about celebrating Japan's female jazz pianists. The concert's called From Tokyo to Times Square. Features some tremendous talent like Miki Hayama, Eri Yamamoto, Mata Kato, and Rina Yamazaki. So this concert starts in November. It's set to run for 7 months. New York audiences will now have the chance to witness some of Japan's finest jazz pianists live in concert. Now this concert not only celebrates Japan's piano whizzes but also the global heritage of jazz. The concert is all about the connection between New York and Tokyo's shared jazz roots, also shining a spotlight on women in jazz. The concert's also going to be streamed to a live audience, allowing people across the world to enjoy the artistry of these pianists. For tickets, please visit decibelpresents.com. So that was some trending concert news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we are going to be talking about some of June Christy's best albums of all time. Stay tuned. And welcome to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. On this week's episode, June Christy, her life and times and best hits. And during this hour, we're going to be talking about some of her best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up during this hour. The first album is called Something Cool, her debut album on Capitol Records. This album showcased her style in all its uniqueness for the very first time. The title track is the standout track of the album. The song went on to become one of Christy's signature performances. The next album is called The Jazz Sessions. This one contains a beautiful compilation of songs from Baby All the Time to How High the Moon. It's also a great live performance compilation by Christy. The Misty Miss Christy is the next album, contains some chart-topping hits. There's a jazz pop theme songs, also emotional ballads. And an album called The Intimate Miss Christy. This album sees Christy's vocals backed by guitar and bass music. That approach was originally popularized by singer Julie London and went on to be adapted by many other singers of her time. That technique began to define the cool jazz style that was June Christy's niche. So that was a quick recap of what's coming up during this hour, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshani Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshani Silva. On this week's episode, June Christy, her life and times and best hits, and during this hour, we're going to be talking about some of her best albums of all time. The first album is called Something Cool. This was released in 1954. Now, this album pretty much sparked off the cool jazz movement as it was known. Christy was already a star. She'd performed alongside the Stan Kenton Orchestra shortly before the release of this album. After she joined Capitol Records, she started working on a new album, a debut album alongside other artists like Bob Cooper and Pete Rugolo. The resulting album was called Something Cool. Both a hallmark of cool jazz, also this album showcased her style in all its uniqueness. Her style was characterized by a striving for powerful songs, unique interpretation and background instrumentals. Also, her artisticness in interpreting a song was absolutely legendary. The title track is the standout track of this album. This one's about a woman who's remembering the good old days. She's sitting in a bar and remembering how men would buy her drinks back then. That song went on to become one of her signature performances. Other great tracks, Midnight Sun, Lonely House and more. There's another great album called The Jazz Sessions. This was released in 2015. Another great album from Christy's stint at Capitol Records. Also a great compilation of live performances by June Christy. This one contains a beautiful compilation of songs like Baby All the Time, that's her duet with Stan Kenton, How High Is the Moon, another collaboration with the Stan Kenton Orchestra. Now this album showcases why Christy was hailed as the ultimate voice of swing. It's a compilation album taken from various live performances, so the background musicians vary. They include Buddy Collett, Russ Freeman, Mel Lewis and more. The Misty Miss Christy, released in 1956. Now this album is not as swinging as Something Cool, however it does contain some chart-topping hits. There's jazz pop themes on songs like Dearly Beloved, That's All and I Didn't Know About You. There's also beautiful renditions of a Thelonious Monk classic called Round Midnight and an emotional ballad called The Wind. Also mainly brass and reed instrumentals on the tracks. Christy is very swinging on Sing Something Single, There's No You and A Lovely Way to Spend an Evening. On this album, her versatility at singing both soft romantic songs as well as powerful upbeat songs comes across. So a great pop jazz album with a theme of romance in it. The final album is called The Intimate Miss Christy, released in 1963. On this album, Christy is backed by guitar and bass music. Now that approach was originally popularized by singer Julie London. It went on to be adapted by many other singers of her time. And that technique began to define the cool jazz style that was June Christy's niche. That style was great for ballad singing, when the singer seeks to be dark and moody. This album is one example. So that was a compilation of some of June Christy's best albums of all time, and welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshani Silva. On this week's episode, June Christy, her life and times and best hits, and now it's time for more festival news. The New Jersey Performing Arts Center has announced the 13th edition of its iconic James Moody Jazz Festival. It's taking place November 7th to 24th. There's a variety of world-class talent performing, and here's some of the names from the lineup. George Clinton, Vernon Reid, John Pizzarelli, Catherine Russell, the New Jersey Symphony, the Kronos Quartet and more. So the festival is taking place at various locations across Newark, New Jersey. Here's some of the highlights. The festival opens up with a performance by Grammy Award-winning Paquito de Rivera alongside the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. On November 16th, Madeline Peru dazzles on stage. On November 23rd, Christian McBride takes the stage alongside an all-star ensemble featuring Diane Reeves, Lisa Fisher and Philip Bailey. Another highlight of the festival, on the final day of the festival, that's the 24th of November, they're going to be announcing the winner of the Sarah Vaughan International Jazz Festival. For more information, please visit njpac.org/jazz. So that was more trending festival news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshani Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about more of June Christy's best albums of all time. Stay tuned.